Namaste, welcome, and aloha. Welcome to verse 1.1.4 Sacred Assembly at Naimisharanya, the power of sacred space and sustained commitment. With this verse, we transition from the philosophical introduction to the actual narrative, titled Sacred Assembly at Naimisharanya. This verse describes an extraordinary gathering of sages in a sacred forest, a gathering that would last 1000 years. This is where the Bhagavatam was spoken. This is where the questions were asked. This is where the answers were given. Let us enter this sacred space. First, the verse in its original Sanskrit, Naimishe Nimishkshetra Sha Shaunkadaya. Satram Swargai Lokai Sahasraswam Mamasat. These words transport us to a sacred time and place. Let us understand what they reveal. Now let us go through the raw form of English translation of the verse. The translation. In Naimisharanya, the sacred forest known as the abode of the demigods, the great sages led by Shaunaka assembled. They were performing a massive sacrificial session intended to last 1000 years for the ultimate benefit of the world. 1000 years for the benefit of the world. Let us explore what this means. Now, let us look at some core teaching of this verse. This verse teaches us about two essential elements of spiritual life: sacred space and sustained commitment. First, sacred space. The sages didn't gather just anywhere. They assembled in Naimisharanya, a sacred forest, also called Animisha Kshetra, the field of the demigods. This was not an ordinary place. It was a place specifically conducive to spiritual realization, a place where the veil between the material and spiritual is thin. Environment matters. The physical space we occupy affects our consciousness. Second, sustained commitment. The sages weren't performing a weekend retreat. They committed to 1000 year sacrifice, Sahasra Samam. Think about that. 1000 years, multiple lifetimes, generations of dedication. This teaches us that the highest knowledge requires sustained, long term commitment, not quick fixes, not shortcuts, but patient, persistent inquiry. And notice the purpose: Swargaya Lokaya, for the benefit of the world. Their sacrifice wasn't selfish, it was for the welfare of all humanity. This is the teaching. True spiritual inquiry happens in sacred space with sustained commitment for the benefit of all. Now let us look at some modern scientific parallels. This ancient wisdom is validated by modern research. First, consider environmental psychology. Studies consistently show that physical environment significantly affects cognitive performance, creativity, and focus. The design of a space, lighting, sound, layout, aesthetics directly impacts our mental state and productivity. The sages understood this. They chose Naimisharanya deliberately. Second, consider attention restoration theory. Research by environmental psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan shows that natural settings restore depleted attention and cognitive resources. When we're mentally exhausted, spending time in nature, forests, gardens, natural landscapes restores our capacity for focused attention. The sages gathered in a forest, not a city, not a busy marketplace, a sacred forest. Third, consider the concept of sacred space in psychology. Designated spaces prime specific psychological states. When you enter a library, you automatically shift into study mode. When you enter a temple, you shift into contemplative mode. Environmental cues trigger mental states. The sages created a sacred space specifically designed to support 1000 year inquiry. The environment itself supported their purpose. Let us now move on to some practical application as it relates to this verse. How do we apply this teaching in our modern lives? First, Create dedicated spaces for focused work or contemplation. You don't need a sacred forest, but you do need a designated space that signals to your mind, this is where I do deep work. This is where I contemplate. This is where I connect with something higher. It could be a corner of your room, a chair by a window, a spot in a park, but make it consistent. Make it intentional. Second, use environmental cues to trigger desired mental states. If you always meditate in the same spot, that spot becomes associated with meditation. When you sit there, your mind automatically shifts into meditative mode. Design your environment to support your highest aspirations. Third, minimize distractions in learning environments. The sages chose a forest away from the noise and chaos of civilization. You may not be able to escape to a forest, but you can turn off notifications, close unnecessary tabs in your laptop browser, create boundaries. Fourth, commit for the long term. The sages committed to 1,000 years. You don't need to commit to 1,000 years, but you do need to understand that spiritual realization is not a weekend project. Make a commitment not just for a week or a month, but for the long haul, for life. And finally, do it for the benefit of others, Swargaya Lokaya. Your spiritual development is not just for you. When you grow, everyone around you benefits, your family, your community, the world. Now, let us look at how this verse can help our young people. For young people, here's a relatable way to understand this verse. Think about gamers who have optimized gaming setups. They don't just play anywhere, they have a specific chair, a specific desk, specific lighting, specific equipment. Everything is optimized for performance. Why? Because they know that environment affects performance. This verse teaches you to apply the same principle to learning and spiritual growth. Create spaces optimized for focus, for reflection, for deep work. Your bedroom might be for sleep, your gaming setup for play, but create a space, even just a corner, for growth, for learning, for contemplation. And when you're in that space, be fully present, make it sacred, make it intentional. Environment shapes behavior. Design your environment to support your highest potential. Now, let us look at how this verse can help our older generation folks. For those with more life experience, this verse speaks to something you already understand. You know that certain spaces evoke certain states of mind. Libraries signal quiet study, places of worship signal reverence, nature signals peace. Let me repeat, libraries signal quiet study, places of worship signal reverence, nature signals peace. You have the wisdom and the means to consciously design spaces in your life that support your highest aspirations. Perhaps it's a meditation room, perhaps it's a reading corner, perhaps it's a garden. Create your own Naimisharanya, a space where you can engage in sustained spiritual inquiry. And at this stage of life, you have the perspective to commit for the long term. The sage is committed to 1,000 years. You may not have 1,000 years remaining, but you can commit the rest of your life to spiritual realization. This is the time, this is the opportunity. Create the space, make the commitment for your benefit and for the benefit of the world. In conclusion, we can say verse 1.1.4 of the Srimad Bhagavatam transports us to Naimisharanya, a sacred forest where great sages assembled for 1,000 year sacrifice. This verse teaches us about the power of sacred space and sustained commitment. We may not have a sacred forest, we may not have 1,000 years, but we can create dedicated spaces. We can make long term commitments and we can do it for the highest purpose, Swargaya Lokaya, for the benefit of the world. The assembly has begun, the questions are about to be asked, the answers are about to be given. Let us enter this sacred space with reverence and commitment. Thank you for exploring verse 1.1.4 with me. Thank you, Namaste, and Mahalo for joining me in this exploration of Canto 1, Chapter 1, Verse 4. Sacred Assembly at Naimisharanya, the power of sacred space and sustained commitment. Next, we will move on, fifth verse of Chapter 1 of Canto 1.